Next up, we have Tim Bird, so let's say welcome to Tim. Thanks for coming.
Okay, I know that we're running a little bit late and I'm all that stands between you and a break, so I'm going to do this fast. This is a presentation that is not a comprehensive look at everything. That's not possible. There's so much going on with embedded Linux. So I apologize in advance if I miss something that you're interested in. This presentation will be in kind of two parts, what I call the fire hose or the shotgun part that's really fast. And this is actually, I give this presentation at other events, and so I have a lot of material in here that's kind of reference material. So there'll be links and stuff. There'll be slides that I only spend like 5 seconds on. So I apologize for that. But if you're interested in the topic on that slide, I've got links to LWNet articles. I've got links to presentations and conference talks. And then at the end, I'll try to wrap it up. So it's going to be a little bit like this, drinking out of a fire hose. But let's go ahead and get started. We'll start right away with the Linux kernel. And I'm actually going to start my stopwatch here. As you notice, the Linux kernel release schedule is so boring. The most exciting thing we had in the last year was that we delayed the release by 1 day because Linus was lazy and did it on a Monday instead of a Sunday. So you can pretty much set your watch by Linux kernel releases, except in the case of 6.15, when will it occur? Well, it happens to be Memorial Day weekend. So I don't know what that means. I think I'm not going to hold Linus to be working and redoing a kernel release on Memorial Day weekend in the United States. That's a big holiday in the United States. This is the only time I asked AI for assistance for this talk. I wanted to know, has the kernel ever been released on a Memorial Day weekend? And the answer is no, unless you count this Saturday, and I don't think this is a Linus release. This is a 2.2.9 back in 1999. So over 20 years ago, there was a release on Memorial Day. The bottom line on all of this is Linus should really take more vacations. But anyway, it'll come out in May. It'll probably be the next weekend or the Wednesday or something. That would be, whoa, mind-boggling. So I'm just going to go really quick through kernel releases. The last year's worth of releases. So in 6.10, we saw a bunch of improvements with Rust, encrypted interactions with the TPM. Cryptostats, they had this whole subsystem that was keeping track of cryptostats. They just pulled that out because nobody was using it. We also got alpha code removed. The interesting thing I thought in Linux 6.10 was they have this new system for doing memory allocation profiling. So they have this really neat set of tools and instrumentation points in the kernel for tracking memory allocation. It's really useful. And particularly, it's useful for tuning like your cache hits on your kernel data structures. And so if you think that you're getting affected by that, then this is the tool for you. It's a really interesting project. In 6.11, we had a new power sequencing subsystem, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Our very own Wolfram Sang got something in, the sloppy logic analyzer, which is a GPIO analyzer inside the kernel, kind of a poor man's GPIO, so you don't have to go out and buy your own. I don't know if it completely replaces OpenOCD or something, but anyway, that's really cool. The kernel is getting so big, there's all kinds of great stuff in there. There's a new runtime const macro, so this is a little bit of replacing kernel code at runtime. We've got virtual machines running in the kernel. Why don't we also have self-modifying code? Actually, that's nothing new to the kernel. It's only used in one place right now. And what it does is it converts some variables into some hard-coded instructions. I think they're using immediate operands so that this particular hot spot in the gentry code is faster. And then there's a new VDSO implementation of get random. And the extensible scheduler class, the big news with the 6.11 release was that it did not go in this release. It actually came into, there was some disagreement about the status of it. But it did land, I think, in the 6.12. So Preempt RT, we already heard that that was the release that the Preempt RT got kind of finalized. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The security module subsystem now uses static calls. So you see a lot of these things in the core are kind of optimizations. So instead of jumping through indirect calls, it's possible to use static calls, which are faster. The tracing ring buffer that persists across reboot, integrity policy, management enforcement. And here we go. The schedgext was actually put in, and this was referred to in the CMOS talk. So this is pretty new. It's exciting that people can experiment with their own schedulers without having to recompile the kernel or even submit them upstream. So there's a little bit of an issue there. But we'll see. We're already seeing a lot of experimentation, particularly by the people who are running data centers. But you also see in the SteamOS case, people want to experiment with schedulers for different workloads. And 6.12 was selected by the Civil Infrastructure Platform as their new super long-term stable release. That means they're going to be supporting 5 kernels and for 10 years. That's a long time to support a kernel. So when they pick one, it's kind of a big deal. In 6.13, now we're getting into January. ARM64 can run Linux in virtual machines under the ARM confidential compute architecture. Some other stuff about ARM64. The lazy preemption patches have been merged, and I'll talk about those in a sec. New thermal threshold system. And enough Rust is now in the kernel. There's enough Rust infrastructure support, in particular for VFS data structures, so that they could handle an implementation of binder in the kernel. And that is pretty crazy. I can remember when the binder support, this is an Android IPC mechanism. It was a big deal when it got accepted into the kernel. And now it's written in Rust. I don't think it's made it to production yet. I was talking to Greg about it the other day. But I want to talk just really briefly about lazy preemption. So this is a new set of patches that has to do with real-time, but it's not for full real-time stuff. So this allows kind of a cleanup or a simplification, if you will, of the different preempt states that are in the kernel. So you have preempt none, preempt voluntary, preempt full, and preempt RT modes. And of course, preempt RT is kind of the full-blown RT mode. But you had kind of a lot of these other different modes you could run the kernel in. And the real-time developers really wanted to clean that up and kind of simplify it. And so they've done this work here. And I will let you read the LWN.net article, which will do it more justice. And then just couple more things with 6.13, multi-grain timestamps for VFS, a new mAdvise thing to install guard pages. RiserFS is now gone. F2FS has some new features. One thing that I thought was interesting in this release was we're seeing a lot more, FDO stands for feed directed optimization. So we're seeing a lot more tooling that where this is a lot of Google and the other cloud providers are doing this type of stuff, where they're taking a kernel, they're running their workloads on it, taking the information and giving that as feedback back either to the compiler or to actually they're taking the binary, disassembling it, reassembling it so that they get better cache hits and better locality on a lot of the operations. And so you're seeing a lot of this optimized, automated optimization of the kernel. And so I think that's actually really interesting. And that's one of the themes, I think, that we're seeing a lot lately. In 6.14, which is the latest kernel that came out in March, we have a new check, the AT exec VE check, to allow us a little bit better security for scripts. The Fuse file system has some performance gains, and then this other stuff. Let me see. Okay, so we've had the merge window for 6.15. I couldn't find a terribly lot of stuff that was relevant to embedded here. So we do have a new kernel command line option having to do with tracing. Automatically disable the trace after the init process is started. And then Fuse now supports handling timeouts. So this is kind of our current status as of May 2025. I apologize. I normally take more time to go through this type of stuff because this is kind of celebrating the work that a lot of the consulting companies are doing. But these are kind of the commit counts. Don't read too much into this. A lot of these, you can have something where you do a single refactoring and get like 500 patches out of it if it's the right type of thing. But this shows you, just as an overview, what kind of things people are working on, who the kind of top contributors are. You see a lot of GPU work, a lot of stuff in timers, SoC support, obviously, and stuff all over the kernel. One note, when I did this, I noticed that I misspelled his name. Uwe Klein-Koenig actually switched from Pengutronics BayLibre. I thought that was interesting, little thing you notice. If you're interested in kind of stats about the kernel, LWN.net has this thing called the kernel source database, and just the 6.14 release had a little bit of a dip, not a big deal, but people kind of noticed that there weren't as many. I think there were about 9,000 commits in that release, and it's normally averaging about 12. So no concern. We'll see. I don't think it's a long-term trend. Okay, just a couple of miscellaneous notes. So Linus really likes imperative commit messages. And he was quite polite about kind of asking people to do better with their commit messages. You can read that message there. Okay, so technology areas. And a lot of the resources I'm going to refer to were talks from ELC Europe, which was last year in September, and also from Plumbers Conference. So if you see something in here you want to look up, go to these sites to find the individual talks or pages. So I have started something called the Boot Time Special Interest Group. And this is just a working group. It's an ad hoc group. It's not supported by any organization. We don't have a board of directors or a committee, a technical committee or anything. It's just a bunch of people that get together on a monthly call and we talk about boot time. If you are interested, our next monthly call is coming up May 27th. Here's a list of kind of the things that people are working on. And like I said, these are going fast. In terms of the core kernel, the capability analysis, so there's this set of patches. They're not in the kernel yet, but there's patches in progress to do what are called capability analysis, where this is for locking and thread safety detection. So you put annotations in the source code, and the compiler, the Clang compilers, GCC doesn't support this yet, but the Clang compiler can actually check that you are doing thread-safe operations, or that you're releasing the locks when you're supposed to, or that you have the appropriate locks. So this is actually another example of automated tooling to improve the kernel, in this case for thread safety. And of course, we have Rust continues to be developed in the kernel. We don't have a whole lot of production-grade drivers yet. But if you're interested in Rust, and you should be because of that red thing at the bottom there, John Corbett gave a really great talk at Open Source Summit Japan and talked about some of the reasons why Rust is taking a while to get there. But I heard this from Greg K.H. at Member Summit last November. Linus says the future of Linux is Rust. Okay, so all of you people who are really proficient at C, you've got a little homework. Sometime in the next 5 years, you probably want to check out Rust. And let's see. Oh, also, Linus does not like case-insensitive file systems. This was a little bit of a blow-up. I don't know if you saw that on the list. But there was a... Linus, this is the... How can I put this nicely? This is the least diplomatic I've seen Linus in probably 5 years. So he's really improved. Anyway, So there's some talks here about maximizing SD card life. Great talk by Andrew Murray. It was given last year at ELC Europe. In terms of GPU, you've got a ton of GPU work going on. And so I think that is great. That has been a sore spot for, particularly for embedded. We've always had a lot of GPU stuff out of tree, but a lot of it is now getting into tree. And Mesa 3D also some good stuff going into tree. Let's see, networking. Here's just some talks about networking. There was a whole track at Plumbers, and these are kind of the stuff they were talking about, reducing the overhead of network virtualization, state of buffer bloat. Again, I'm just giving you a real skim across the surface. In terms of power management features, this was a great overview talk at ELC Europe about the different features. And one thing that was really interesting was Stephen Boyd was there talking about kind of, there's so many things in the core kernel to do power management, suspend, idle, frequency, all that kind of stuff. But he was saying that we kind of needed to look at it also from an SoC standpoint. And he made the case for having an SoC-specific power driver. Power management driver. And I thought that was a really interesting talk. I don't know the status of it since then, but that's something to check out. And then, like I said, PowerSeek was added in 2.6.11. This allows you to handle the sequencing of when you bring power up on your SoC, because there's a lot of issues involved there. So the kernel has this new capability to handle that much better. Okay, real-time preemption. What's left? Okay, so John spoiled my surprise. Nothing's left. They were accepted in the 6.12 merge window. Thomas Gleixner printed the pull request on paper, wrapped it with a golden bow, and handed it personally to Linus. I thought that was great. And he did it with a nice ceremonial bow. And that happened in Vienna. It turns out, of course, there's always a couple little things that you want to clean up after the fact. So my advice to people was to wait until 6.13. But there are patches outstanding. There's about 58 patches still outstanding. But it's no longer like the features out of the tree. The features definitely in the tree. These are just development patches, right? So this is the same type of thing that every other subsystem has. They have their next tree saying, what are some more things we're working on? And so even though you see that there's patches not upstream, that's totally normal. Every subsystem has patches not upstream. They're working on a lot more stuff. If you want to get a retrospective on kind of all this stuff and kind of the history, there was a great talk by Sebastian and by Steve. I think those were at... Oh, it was kernel recipes. Okay, last year. And then what's next? A lot of the stuff that John talked about today is what's next. They're working on tooling to help identify problems with applications and that type of stuff. Let's see. In terms of security, there's a steady stream, constant stream of patches and fixes to handle security issues in the kernel. New proposal to use hashing instead of signing for secure module loading. If you can't immediately think of some issues with that, then you haven't done this work before, but I encourage you to read that article. There was a good status talk talking about a lot of security now is coming from the tooling again, and this was a good comparison of which tools supported what types of security operations or security analysis or defenses. And the status of them. And so you can see some things are green, some things are red, some things are yellow. So there's a lot of work in progress on the tooling for security. We've revived the Automated Testing Summit. There'll be one in Denver this year. If you're interested in that, the CFP closes on Monday. I'm going really fast now. Let's see. I really enjoyed the Perfetto talk today, and if you want even more Perfetto stuff, there was a good talk also by Anna-Lena Marks and Stefan Lingfeld at ELC Europe. So And let's see, Yocto project. We just had Walnut-Scar, a new Yocto project minor release come out just like a couple of weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago. You can look at the status of that. And I think there's actually a lightning talk talking a little bit about the Yocto project and YP. The one thing I've been following is BitBake Setup, which is a new integrated feature. So we've had CAS for quite a long time, which is a tool to take a single YAML file and pull all your layers in and set you up to do your first build. But they're doing something now that's going to be built into BitBake and Yocto project. And so that's something. It's not upstream yet, but I understand the patches have been put on the mailing list and they're being reviewed. So there's also been a build root release, and I'm going to have to. I got to mention this. So people are even working on tooling for shell scripts to do static analysis to detect bugs in shell scripts, but without executing them. So crazy stuff is going on. Okay. I'm going to go very quickly. Linux Foundation, that was the list of all the projects that are kind of embedded related or embedded adjacent. One of the big ones is AGL. They had a release in February. The one I'm excited about is modeled after AGL called SGL, which is the space-grade Linux work. And this is being done under the umbrella of the ELIZA because space grade has a lot of these safety requirements. And we had a meeting at NASA in December, and this is how these projects get started. You get a bunch of people together, a bunch of companies, and pretty soon you have a distro and tooling and stuff for that. Okay, moving right along to miscellaneous stuff. I'm going to skip that first one. There's a new developer support okay, I said I was going to skip it, and then I didn't. Okay, because I wanted to get this one. So AI scraping. AI is interesting, but it's causing lots of problems for open source projects. There's too many AI systems that are scraping OSS projects for their training data. And it's gotten kind of into a serious issue. I think it was one of the projects, I can't remember which one it was, had to actually block the entire country of Brazil in order to save themselves money. 75% of the traffic to readthedocs.io was scrapers. And it was costing them $1,500 a month. And Read the Docs, right, is a free service to the open source community. And that's like real money. The scrapers are not well behaved. Some of them will identify themselves in their browser strings, but a lot of them won't. They'll switch IPs. It's like botnet attacks. So it amounts to a denial of service attack on these sites. And a lot of it is open source sites, right? So that is a big problem. Even our very own LWN.net has been affected by this. They had an article talking about, they've tried all kinds of solutions, robots.txt, throttling, tar pits. They don't want to add like JavaScript and gatekeeping. That's what Lore had to do. I don't know if you noticed, but there's now a human detector on Lore. And so it's not just scraping that is causing kind of internet bandwidth problems, but you're seeing a lot of fake content. So Stack Overflow had to adopt some policies to restrict AI submissions. Curl has been flooded with a ton of invalid, just bogus AI-generated bug reports. And so it's having a real impact. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution. I mean, I'm hoping that the Linux Foundation will step in and maybe do some support. The Linux Foundation is kind of like the IT department for a lot of open source projects. Okay, so changing subjects completely. Ubuntu is changing to some Rust-based utilities for core utilities. And that is very interesting. There's a lot of angst because they're moving from a GPL license to MIT license, but I don't think most people care. I don't know. There are some people who care a lot about the license of core utils, but it shows you that again, more and more Rust is getting adopted, and it's to improve the security through language features, right? So this is just kind of yet another example. Redis went to a business-oriented license, and they had to recant just this month because the community and the industry created a fork called Valkey that was BSD 3 clause. So Redis had to kind of backpedal on that. So I don't know how to put this. I won't comment on that. But I was happy to see them see the light. Okay, and then I'm going to skip over. This stuff is about Intel and stock and this shift to NVIDIA's market cap. NVIDIA has a new ARM-based, a Linux-based ARM AI desktop computer. Okay, so we're seeing AI being developed as a first-class citizen in terms of the feature set for laptops and desktops. And that's pretty interesting. So I really think we're starting to see the age of AI here. Okay, I'm trying to keep myself on track. We'll see. Okay, in terms of community, just a couple little things. Okay, so there was this kerfluffle back in, I think it was October. It was called the removal of the Russian maintainers. It was more complicated than that. There was a patch that removed a bunch of maintainers, and there were complaints that, oh, this wasn't discussed beforehand. It turned out it had been discussed beforehand. There was a lot of speculation about, the kernel's now involved in geopolitics. It was not a removal of Russian nationals because we have anything against individuals, but it was removal of people who worked for specific companies. And the problem is it was a requirement by the U.S. government. And I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but there are geopolitical sanctions that happen. This is because of the Ukraine war, and Russia was sanctioned, and so there were limits to what representatives of Russian companies could do with regard to technology in the U.S. And so Linus and Greg have to, do you want to say anything?
It's not just U.S., it's the EU, and Switzerland, it's all of them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Greg was right in the middle of all this, so he knows. U.S. was not the only country that had sanctions on Russia. And we did as well as we could to abide by all of the regulations of everywhere that Linux is developed and used. And I have to say the Linux Foundation did a lot of legwork here that I don't think a lot of people appreciate. The Linux Foundation is the kind of the legal department of the kernel. It's a legal department that no one here, except for maybe Greg, talks to very often. And so there's actually, they put out a really good kind of description of everything that happened, the timeline and the reasons for everything on Phoronix. And so if you want to look that up, you can. There was also, one of the first code of conduct penalties I've seen in quite some time in November. So there was a maintainer, there was some issues, there were some email exchanges that were not very friendly. The penalty, we see a lot. So most people don't realize there is a code of conduct committee operating behind the scenes that takes care of trying to safeguard our working environment, right, to make sure that it's not hostile. And the developer apologized. It was a relatively minor, I thought, penalty. He was banned for one release, so he wasn't ejected from the community, wasn't removed from mailing lists. And he apologized, and he's now an active developer. So I just want people to remember that there are all these kind of processes outside the technical sphere that are going on. And making, I think, the community and the development process a better experience. Okay, so I'm gonna keep plowing through really fast, but I'm gonna skip a lot of this. Okay, so Embedded Linux Conference is coming up in Denver in the U.S. and in Amsterdam in August, and And so we experimented with something this year. It turned out not to be such a great idea. We had a single CFP for both events because they were so close together. And I know having them close together was a bad idea, and I apologize for that. Anyway, it is what it is. Later in the year, we've got Open Source Summit Japan, Linux Plumbers Conference. Both events, obviously, in Tokyo. And so that should be a really good event. I'll just keep going. Okay, with the eLinux Wiki, where we've got a lot of embedded Linux information, the OSU OSL just recently announced that they're running a little bit low on funding. There's a crowdfunding site for donations. Okay, conclusions. Okay, so this is I want to make sure we have enough time for eating some stuff, but just a couple little wrap-up things. So what are the themes? And I want to talk a little bit about where we came from. So one of the themes is AI is upon us, and it's bringing a whole host of challenges. So we got the traffic challenges, we have hallucination challenges, we have license and provenance challenges. That was not on my bingo card for this decade. I didn't think AI has. It's been like only 3 years, but that is really kind of churned in. And it also, my question is, okay, so where's the AI directory in the kernel tree? Because we know we got to have drivers for this stuff, and we have to deal with it as a computer science technology, right? As something the kernel has to deal with as well. So AI is going to bring a lot of churn in a lot of different ways. The other thing is use of tools, compiler features, automation. So we see this feedback-directed optimization, the thread annotations, a lot of automated testing. People are putting a lot of effort into kernel CI and other projects. And of course, the rise of Rust, a whole set of language features to address making the kernel better just kind of intrinsically and with less kind of manual labor. And then finally, I think one of the big themes is the community is more mature, professional, and friendly. Right? So a lot of stuff happens in the background that we sometimes don't acknowledge or appreciate. We have an active code of conduct committee. The Linux Foundation acts as, I tried to think of all the things the Linux Foundation does, and a lot of people don't know what they do. I happen to be kind of more deeply involved, but they do legal stuff, they do HR stuff, they do IT, they do marketing, if you count conferences as kind of marketing. They also do IP. A lot of people don't know how much work the Linux Foundation does to make sure that we're protected from patents and patent trolls. That stuff happens all the time. They're the payroll department. There are some people who are paid, and the accounting department, and much, much more. If I was to give this presentation to myself 32 years ago, I would not have believed it. I was involved in a couple of different companies early on, Novell, Caldera, Lineo, and I helped create the Embedded Linux Consortium, and that was mainly a promotion organization because nobody believed in Linux. I was involved in Consumer Electronics Linux Forum. That involved technical development, and then the Core Embedded Linux project with ecosystem building. So no one in the 90s believed Linux would become anything. Not on desktops, right? We take it for granted that Linux is the #1 operating system in servers, and it's made inroads in desktops. But especially in embedded, nobody believed in Linux. Remember, back in those days, there was no Git, there was no Bitkeeper. Linux was using patches and tarballs, okay? We didn't have lore. There was LKML.org. Remember, this was before Google. We didn't have Google, okay, in those days. There was no methodical release process. There was no code of conduct. There were some communication norms, and things were a little bit rougher back then. But there was no trademark, no legal protection, no patent protection. We only had one tool chain. Compared to that, we're in the golden age of embedded Linux. We really are. We've got so much going on. I know just watching the presentations, there's a lot of work still that needs to be done. But things are really, really great. And I would say they've never been better. So what do I worry about? AI. And I already kind of talked about all this. AI is putting stress on open source ecosystems. I don't think it's really good at creating new technology, and there are kind of issues there. So there's some things that AI doesn't do very well, and we have to be kind of careful about that. Maintainers, I always worry about maintainers. Although recently, I've seen a lot more. I was just introduced to a couple of new maintainers, younger maintainers. I hate to say it, but a lot of us are getting older. I have 8 grandchildren, okay? So, and I'm not going to be around forever, right? I have things I want to do with my grandkids that are, don't involve Linux kernel. So we really need to be, getting that new generation of people, and I'm actually heartened. I've seen some good progress there. I do worry also about the tools. All this automation that we're doing, are we going to break the network effects? And I don't have time to talk about everything. There are still some things in the Linux kernel, like boot up time optimization, that take too much manual effort. And so that's kind of what I'm focused on just myself recently. But there are things like that, right? There's stuff that could be easier, that shouldn't be so hard to do. But overall, we're doing great. The kernel core systems, they're all in place to support embedded. And conservatively, we're in 2.5 billion devices, okay? Conservatively. Probably more than that. It gets hard to count because there's so many instances we don't know. But after 32 years, I can't believe we're not done yet. Anyway, so think about what's left to do, what we can do to make things better. And with that, just a quick list of resources. I get a lot of my information from LWN.net, Phoronix, Kernel Newbies. And while we're talking about LWN.net, they are suffering a little bit of a funding crisis. So if you can go out and get yourself a professional subscription, that would be great. And with that, I will say thanks.
Thanks, Tim. We have time for a couple questions. Yeah.
Rather a comment, small comment. Half of the presentation I was thinking, okay, where is AI? Where is AI? And the second half of almost was about AI. And now about AI and open source and commit messages. It's interesting that a colleague of mine noticed that AI is very good to make good commit messages in imperative mode. Basically, you put data and tell, make me imperative mode. So it might be good.
Yeah, well, if AI can intuit what Linus likes in the commit messages, then that's good. My rule is if you can't tell that a human didn't write it, then maybe it's okay. But for commit messages, we've always had kind of crummy. Well, we've had suboptimal commit messages for some of our patches. But like for code, I really worry about code getting into the kernel. So.
Looks like everybody wants coffee, so let's take a break.
Okay, great.
Let's see, what time is it? Let's come back. Yeah, let's come back at past. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.